Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, a lot of people are looking for confirmation that there's life after death. And today we've got somebody on who's had some really remarkable experiences and is doing some fabulous work. So Heidi, let's get to it. Why don't you introduce her?
Okay, Mom, we're going to talk with Irene Weinberg today. And as you know, we met Irene at Helping Parents Heal, and she interviewed us for her podcast. We are going to be talking today about grief and rebirth, like you said. And Irene is the author of They Serve Bagels in Heaven, which is a love story that begins with the messages Irene received during a tragic car accident that claimed the life of her husband. She is the creator of the inspiring podcast, which we have been on, and it is called Grief and Rebirth, Finding the Joy in Life. Welcome to our show, Irene.
Oh, it's so great to be here with both of you. So what a pleasure to see you again.
Yes, we met Irene at Helping Parents Heal in Arizona, a wonderful organization. Why don't you start out by telling us your story?
Sure. Well, I want to start by saying to everyone that I was a complete skeptic before this happened to me. I thought any notions of spirituality were hooey, ridiculous. And I had a sister-in-law who was very spiritual, and my husband and I used to laugh about her, that she was cuckoo. But guess what? I'm cuckoo too now, because what happened to me was I was married to the love of my life. It was a second marriage. We were married about 18 years, bringing up each other's children. And I was one day washing dishes at my kitchen sink, and suddenly a thought came into my head that was not my thought. And it said, Saul has to go. Many lessons will be learned by his death. And I was like, what the heck am I thinking? And I gave him a glass of water. He was watching, you can tell I'm a Jersey girl. He was watching a Jets game on TV in our family room. I kissed the top of his head. I handed him a glass of water, and I put the thought completely out of my mind. Of course, you never forget it. But I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't know what I was thinking. And 2 months later, we were on the New York State Thruway, coming home from a ski weekend. We were going 72 miles an hour on the left side of a two-lane road. And all of a sudden, I felt the car go into a huge swerve. And I looked over at my husband and I said, Saul, and he was sound asleep at the wheel.
Wow.
And he woke up and he went to try to pull the car out of the swerve. And as he did, our car rose up into the air for the first of 4 flips. As a result of the accident, I had 4 major surgeries over 2 years, but I was conscious through everything. And as we took the first ride up, it was like I was in a gigantic roller coaster. The car kept flipping over and bouncing hard. Wow. And as we took the first ride up, another message came into my head, and it said, he's not going to make it, you are. And as we landed upside down on the side of the road, and I looked over at Saul, and I said, honey, are you okay? And indeed, what I'd been told was true. I realized I was sitting next to the shell of my husband, and that indeed he was gone. And I thought, oh my God, something is up. I got all of a sudden changed my belief system. I was like, I got those messages and this is coming true. And then I suddenly saw a helicopter landing, and these EMTs jumped out of the helicopter, righted my car. One of the EMTs reached his hands through my shattered window, undid my seatbelt, turned me around, grabbed me by my shoulders. And as he was pulling me out of my car, an unemotional, authoritative male voice, like I got a heavenly directive. And here my husband is gone. And the directive is be loving and kind to everyone, as they laid me on the side of the road. And I have to tell you, ladies, this changed my life. Instead of screaming for me, I knew something was up. I suddenly perceived that Saul was with me, but now on the other side. I started saying to people, what's your name? It's the weekend before Christmas. Instead of screaming for myself as they were tying a tourniquet around my leg and all, I'm saying, thank you for coming out. Thank you for helping me. They load me into a helicopter to take me to an emergency trauma center. I have the same attitude when they bring me to the emergency trauma center. And the way I handled things with love and kindness to everyone and not screaming for myself, I literally got a call 3 months later from the assistant to the surgeon who saved my life. And she said, I want you to know that you changed lives in the emergency room that night.
Wow.
We never
Wow.
saw anyone respond to a tragedy like you had the way you did. And I said, Trish, I had a spiritual awakening. It changed my life.
Wow. Wow.
Right. So now I'm in grieving hell. I mean, all right, now I'm 3 days in the hospital, 2 blood transfusions, 19 stitches in an artery in the bottom of my foot. And I didn't know I had 3 big operations yet to come. And I come home and all of the issues, stepchildren, finances, business, everything left up in the air. And I'm in a wheelchair.
Wow.
And I'm just about out of my wheelchair about 6 weeks later when I got a call from my dry cleaner. Now I'm starting to get an idea that something is up and there's more to life than what we see. But of course, I'm enmeshed in the details of what's going on, choosing a
Right. Yeah.
coffin,
Yeah.
in my tradition, Shiva, and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Business.
There's business to be done. It's because, I was widowed a couple of years ago. There's a lot of business.
A lot of business, and he left me with all kinds of business issues because he wasn't planning.
Right.
Let's put it this way, on the physical level, he wasn't planning to go.
Right.
His soul knew something else, which I found out later. So I got a call because I'm very friendly, and I got a call from my dry cleaner. I talked to everyone, and my dry cleaner called me. He said, Irene, he said, I don't usually share this information with people, but I feel like you need to know that 8 years ago, my son died of a drug overdose, and my wife and I were inconsolable. And we went to all these grief specialists and counselors, and no one really could help us. And then we found out that the soul goes on to the other side. He said, and we've been in communication with our son through this person and that person. And in 2 weeks, we are going to be seeing a guy who's going to be very famous one day. And if you come with us, it won't even cost you anything. And you may get a message from Saul. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew something was up. I'm just out of my wheelchair. 2 weeks later, I drive to his home, which is 5 towns away from me, get out of his car, and I go into my dry cleaner's car. So my car is at my dry cleaner's home. And we drive another 6 towns away to a Hilton where this man is. And we walk in and he looks at me and he says, I don't even want to know your name. Just go upstairs. I had no idea what I was coming to. And there were about 35 people in the room. And in those days before voice recorders, each one of these people had someone to take notes as people came through. And it was like Saul waited for me to get the idea that these people were getting these amazing messages from their loved ones. I'm getting a message from someone who shot himself in the head with a pistol. Oh my gosh, that's my father. I'm getting a message from someone who says she saw her daughter hanging 3 pieces of art for Christmas. Oh my God, that's my mother. And about halfway into it, he said, I'm getting a message from someone who's talking about Dr. Pepper. And I nudged my dry cleaner and I said, oh my God, it's Saul. 15 years before he met me, my husband's brother, who was a big advertising executive on Madison Avenue in New York City, put my husband's name, Saul Weinberg, in a Dr. Pepper commercial that it was coming east from California. And let's talk to the man in the street, Saul Weinberg, what he thinks of Dr. Pepper soda. And he used to think it was hilarious. And the medium who was doing this, who was just starting out, was the very famous John Edward. Wow. And Saul came through for like 40 minutes with such details, including he's telling me you're driving his favorite car with Saul Z on the license plate. I mean, how the heck could John Edward know
Mhm.
I love
That
that.
this was
Salty.
parked like towns away in my dry cleaner's driveway. And he's telling me, you're wearing a skier charm under your blouse. Who is Matt? I said, oh my God, that's my son. He's talking about Bruce, my stepson. On and on and on and on. He's saying he died in a different state than where you live. He died in New York. We lived in New Jersey. On and on and on.
How has this changed your life?
Oh my God. Well, it started opening me up to the fact that we go on. It started opening me up, and I started seeing other mediums, and I started getting another message that there was a divine plan, that Saul and I had been in many lifetimes together. Who knew that Saul and I had been in many lifetimes together, and that there was a plan that if certain things didn't work out for him in this lifetime, he was going to leave early, and we were going to work across the veil to help a lot of people. And I'm starting to get a message that I'm supposed to write a book. I said, a book? What book? I was a violinist growing up. I was a buyer for Macy's. I helped him in the real estate business, but it was him. And I started working with someone and channeling a book and asking him questions. What was it like for you to cross over? What do they do about people who are evil people? What do they do? Tell me about soulmates, and on and on and on. And I wrote the book, and now I was out there in this world with my book, They Serve Bagels in Heaven.
They serve bagels in heaven, right?
And
Great name.
thank you. And there is a scene where what I learned is that when you cross over to the other side, they create a visual for you that makes you comfortable as you acclimate to your new situation without your body. And his was that his mother met him and created a scene for him where they were having coffee and bagels together in heaven. So now I'm opening up to all of this, and I'm having a good time, and I'm helping a lot of people. It happened in 1997, so I can easily talk about it because it's been 25 years. But the interesting thing
And
is,
it sounds like it's been a real journey for you.
it's been
Mhm.
amazing, and it changed my life because, Gloria, to tell you the truth, it changed the way I handle everything. I'm conscious now. The big difference it made for me is that I know that we go on. I know that I need to be responsible for my choices. I know that I need to be responsible for the way I handle people and talk to people, that everyone is on their own journey, that I try very hard. I work very hard on not judging people anymore. And being, and also that loving and kind means being loving and kind to me too. So you know how so many
I
of
like
us,
that.
so many of us worry about being loving and kind or being good to the people in our lives. But what good are you to anyone if you don't also take good care of yourself?
Mhm.
So Irene, how do you take care of yourself?
First thing I did, which is part of my podcast that
Mhm.
has evolved, is I went to healers.
Mhm.
I went to a life transition coach. And as I opened up to this world, I also went to an energy healer, and I worked with mediums.
I'm listening and I'm like, I wish I could do that. It sounds expensive.
I have to say that I also found that there are mediums who can work in group situations where it's cheaper to get a message. I facilitated many of that. And there are a lot of organizations where you can get help. Like one of the first organizations I worked with for counseling was Jewish Family Service, that charges you according to need. So I am sure that people can find counseling. And now there's telehealth, and there's all kinds of things that people can take advantage of. I had worked with this life transition coach years earlier for other issues, so it was easy for me to go back. And a lot of therapy is also covered by insurance these days, so it doesn't have to be that exorbitant. And the other thing I think about is, isn't your emotional health worth investing in?
So Irene, you were a young widow, and I'm wondering, I mean, Saul died before old age. So did you find support with other women that had had a loss of a spouse?
I did. I joined some grief support groups. And I found though that some of the women who were in grief support, they were leaning on me because I was getting counseling.
Mhm.
Okay.
So maybe that's
So
something else that will happen to me. If I don't have the money and I find other women, I can even follow that trail. And
absolutely,
peer support is actually the number one way that people get help. So
absolutely.
peer support's a wonderful thing. Well, tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you're doing now, because I know that's another free thing, right?
It's a free thing, and it not only is a free thing, but so many people are getting help from it. I became very passionate about healing because I realized that as I was healing my issues with grieving and learning how to be alone in the world without Saul, and boy, that was a hard adjustment and a lot of work on my part. And then I was opening up spiritually also, and doing a lot of energy work. As I was growing, I was realizing that this backpack of troubles that I had grown up with from my childhood and different things were starting to loosen. I was letting go of them because I was healing. And one day I was sitting here, as you see me, and I don't get all these messages, and the word podcast came into my head. And I did not even know what that was because I'm a baby boomer. So I said to my publicist, "What's a podcast?" And she said, "Oh, I can help you do that." And I thought, I said to myself, well, I'm getting a message. This is my next step. So understanding now that I'm a light worker to bring these concepts out to the world, I thought, well, who am I going to interview? And I said, because I was helped by counseling, I'm going to interview grief and trauma therapists. Because I was helped by an energetic healer, I said, I'm going to interview healers. Because I was helped by mediums, I said, I'm going to help mediums. And the most amazing thing that also happened to me was, as they pulled me out of the car, my husband was buried on my son's 21st birthday. And as they pulled me out of the car, one of my thoughts, not something that came from the other side, my thought was, I am going to get through this somehow, because I have to teach my son that you can get hit by a grenade in life and come through it to the other end.
Wow.
And I became very, very passionate about doing everything I could to move in my process, in my way to move through this. And my son, 4 years after Saul died, made the comment to me, "Mom, there's been nothing worse than seeing you in complete despair, and nothing better than seeing you being able to have joy again."
Wow. Well, let's end on that note, because that is a fabulous note. And you certainly have found joy and brought joy into the world. How do people find your podcast? I'm sure your book's on Amazon.
My book is on Amazon. You can go right to ireneweinberg.com. My podcast is right there. I'm also on all the podcast outlets. I'm on YouTube. And the podcast is now in 17 countries. It's helping a lot of people. And because I interview healers, what happens is a lot of people go to my podcast, and I have everything categories. If you're a healer, if you're a medium or whatever, and whatever your issue is, you can go onto the healing community on my podcast, and you can find people who match your need or who you want to learn from. So that's an inexpensive way for people also to get healing in a way, because I ask those questions.
Thank you so much for being on this show
My
today.
pleasure.
We are on one of her podcasts, so we enjoyed it a lot. And thank you so much for everything you're doing in Saul's memory and telling us about your experiences.
Thank you. And I encourage everyone to check out your interview on my podcast.
Thank you for helping people find joy in life again.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. Thank you.
Heidi and I want to thank everybody, all of you, for joining our show today. And we always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.